Alright guys, welcome back to the Pokémads channel. It's Maddie here, and guess what? The full set for Pulsing Aura, the new B3 expansion coming to Pokemon Pocket, has been fully released. I think the update came out early, so we have all of the data mines for every new card coming in this new expansion. Very exciting. We're going to review the whole set today. We're going to break everything all down. I'm going to share my opinions. We're going to talk about it. Really excited. It's been a while, it feels like, since we got new cards released to Pokemon Pocket, so this is going to be, a ton of fun. I'm really excited. The set is officially releasing tonight, as I record this on Monday, April 27th. It'll be releasing tonight, I think about 8 p.m., so we will be live for the set release. We'll open a bunch of packs, and we will, of course, test out some of the new decks and the new update. It's going to be a lot of fun. So, come and tune in to the live stream. Also, our next tournament, our first tournament of this new season, PMPT number 29, has been officially posted, so it is open for registration. If you guys want to go ahead and come and compete this weekend, Saturday, May 12th, it'll be, again, the first tournament of this new season in Pokemon Pocket, but also the new Pocket Mads Tournament Series season, right? So this is technically getting into Season 3, so those series rankings have reset. Very exciting. Very exciting. I'm excited for this. Link to register down in the description below. Let's get into this new set. Let's do it. Of course, the trailer just came out only like 3 or 4 days ago, so we have seen some of these cards, a few of them at least, but a lot of them we have not seen. And keep in mind, this is a full expansion, so what they've been doing for these full expansions is that they are basically like 2 booster packs worth of cards, but they're all packed into a single booster pack, just like Fantastical Parade was a couple of months ago, which I know not everybody loved, but that's, that's how it's going. All right. Anyway, let's dive right into it. So I don't want to cover every single card in the set because some of these just aren't really worth it. But let's just sort of talk about some of the things that I think are, most relevant. And first off, let's talk about Celebi here. Can we zoom in a little bit? There we go. So this new Celebi card is pretty cool. It's got the ability Time Recall, 70 HP Grass type basic, retreat cost of 1, weak to fire. This ability says each of your evolved Pokemon can use any attacks from its previous evolutions, and you still need the necessary energy to use each attack. So this is basically, what is it, Memory? I forget what it's called, Memory Light? It's the tool card that allows you to do this exact thing. However, now it is in the effect of a Pokemon. So you're going to see that a little bit throughout the set. Definitely some previous effects power crept a little bit, kind of replacing old cards that had similar effects. And, that's, bound to happen eventually, in the timeline here of Pokemon Pocket. But yeah, the Celebi card's really cool. It's cool that you can just play this Pokemon and basically have the, the Memory Light tool card just on all your Pokemon at all times, right? So you can play Memory Light and also play another tool card. This is going to be really nice for Donphan. I don't know if you would play Celebi Donphan, but theoretically, you could play like Heavy Helmet and still use the previous evolution's attacks. So there's a lot of scenarios where Memory Light is cool, and this might make it a little bit easier to kind of use those Pokemon or kind of utilize those strategies that you would be using Memory Light for. It should be a lot more consistent to get a basic Pokemon on your bench than to find, that particular tool card, and I think that's going to be really, really cool. So I like this card. Shout out to Celebi. Very, very cool. We are getting a new Sceptile, Mega Sceptile, and here's the Trico that we saw, and then here's the Grovyle. It does, for 2 grass energy, does 50 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon, 80 HP, and then there is a non-EX Sceptile, which does Leaf Blade for 2 grass energy, 70 damage, flip a coin of heads, it does 50 more. This has retreat cost of 1, 140 HP, and then of course we have Mega Sceptile, and this is, one of the cards that was released in the trailer, 210 HP grass type, so you can Leaf Cape this, go to 240. It is a stage 2, so you can use Lily. It's a 2 energy attack cost, 130 damage, and you discard a grass energy from this Pokemon. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. So Mega Sceptile is effectively the grass type version of Mega Blaziken. They are basically the exact same card, except this is grass type and just poisons instead of burns. Now, theoretically, this is technically better because, we don't have Flame Patch, so that's the one downside to Mega Sceptile, but we do have things like Leafeon if you wanted to, accelerate energies that way. Also you could play like Nihilego, another, I guess that's really the only poison damage boosting card in the game. But yeah, it's a really cool card. I think it definitely will be pretty relevant, because it's a stage 2 Pokemon with a low energy attack cost. I don't know if you would ever really use Quick Growth Extract. Even though it's a grass type Pokemon, I think you just would run this as like a rare candy deck. But a really cool card. I think it's probably going to be somewhat relevant, in the metagame. Let's fast forward down here to We have Shroomish here with Spore, so you can put your opponent to sleep for 1 grass energy, and that evolves into Breloom, which is pre-dawn strike 30 damage, and if your opponent's Pokemon is asleep, it does 90 damage for 1 grass energy, which is actually pretty terrifying when you consider all of the ways that we have to put Pokemon to sleep into the metagame right now. So I actually really like Breloom. I think it's a pretty decent card. And then, of course, Badoo. We have a couple of new baby Pokemon coming in this set. A lot of people talking about Badoo here. This is Prickly Powder, 10 damage, and the defending Pokemon loses all abilities. And this effect lasts until the defending Pokemon leaves the active spot. So it's basically just like Chingling is like item lock. This is ability lock in the form of a baby Pokemon, which is going to be pretty relevant. We talked about this in the trailer announcement video when they showed Badoo. I think this card is definitely going to be pretty relevant. At the end of the day, even though the effect reads that the ability should, or the negative effect should last, if your opponent evolves their Pokemon, it will or definitely should nullify or wipe all of those negative effects that are on your opponent's Pokemon. So this isn't going to stop like a Dino from just rare candying and then still being able to use Hydreigon's ability. But Badoo's going to be pretty nice because you could swap it in on a Hydreigon after it's already attacked and then stop it from doing anything after that, which is pretty cool. And also you'll hit for weakness on dark type Pokemon because it's a grass type baby Pokemon. So that's a cool card. I like it. Next up here, there's going to be this Durant. Let's take a look. This is Bite Together. Basic 70 HP, 1 grass energy. It does 20 damage, but if a Durant is on your bench, it does 30 more. So 50 damage pretty easily on this grass type Pokemon. This is actually not really bad at all. Going to be extremely strong into Hydreigon, no matter what they lead off with. Being able to hit for effectively 70 damage for weakness on turn 1 is going to be a really big deal. So I think Durant's really good. There's also a new stadium that's come out that's going to be really good for grass type Pokemon and grass type decks. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that Durant card definitely somewhat relevant. Next up is Flapple. Flapple has Sour Spit, 1 grass energy, stage 1 Pokemon, so you can do this on your second turn going first, which is relevant. 40 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, attacks used by the defending Pokemon cost 1 more. So again, another pretty relevant card. Like, these are not bad Pokemon whatever at all, especially in anything that's like weak to grass. But as we know, Hydreigon is certainly, that whole deck is kind of weak to grass. So I like this. I like this attack. It also protects you from Hydreigon even being able to attack on their second turn after Rare Candy. That is, I guess, unless they go second. No, yeah, they never can because Hydreigon generates 2 energies. So I like this card. It's actually going to be really relevant. You're almost always going to be able to get double Sour Spits off. Pretty cool. I like it. All right, and then out of left field, we have Mega Camerupt. So a couple of Gen 3 goats here coming in Pulsing Aura. And that's going to be Mega Camerupt EX. This card is very interesting. So 210 HP, Fire type, Mega, Stage 1, retreat cost of 4, and weak to water. So Heavy Helmet is going to be relevant on this guy. But interesting attack. So for 4 fire energies, one of your opponent's Pokemon is chosen at random, do 160 damage to it. So again, kind of a strange card. 160 is a lot, but for 4 energies, this is fire type, so we have plenty of ways to kind of get these fire energies onto Mega Camerupt, which I think is pretty good. Decent amount of HP, but 160 to a random Pokemon is definitely a little bit interesting. I just don't know if this is ever going to be something that you're like going to want to play. We have a lot of strong fire type Pokemon. Like when you take a look at this, like in comparison to like either of the Charizards, it seems like a strange card. Like I just don't expect this to really be something that people would choose to play. But maybe, I don't know. Like any fire type deck running a fire energy acceleration package or anything like that would probably be more well suited on like a different Pokemon. But this is certainly a pretty funny Pokemon. I don't know. That's kind of my opinions about it. I don't really have anything too highly to say about this Camerupt. It is a pretty funny card. I just don't. This is like the opposite of what I would expect like a meta relevant Mega Pokemon to look like, but it is here. So we have Mega Camerupt, and then here's the normal version, which is Eruption. This card is actually a bit more decent. 3 fire energy, 60 damage, flip 3 coins for each heads. You discard a fire energy from this Pokemon and it does 30 more for each fire energy you discarded this way. I mean, it's not great, but we do have the new Victini card, which we'll highlight, which is going to allow you basically to to flip heads always, I think, or reflip your coins on any fire type Pokemon attacks, which is a weird effect, but we'll talk about it. We're also getting all of the new cast forms, which is pretty cool. So we have, of course, like the water, the normal, the fire type cast form cards, and they're all actually pretty interesting. So basic fire type, 70 HP, 1 energy. Sunny Scorching does 30 damage, but if a stadium is in play, your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. So this is going to be a really decent leadoff Pokemon for a variety of different fire type decks, especially anything that boosts the damage with burn. And I know we do have some fire type Pokemon that do utilize burn. So this is going to be an interesting card. I mean, it's very consistent, very easy to get a stadium in play early on, 70 HP, and the damage is just decent. 30 plus burn is a decent amount, and it will KO baby Pokemon, so I actually really like this. I think this is kind of just a better card than like the Heatran or whatever that just does 30 to the active. And then here's Victini, like I said, a very interesting card releasing in this set. Once during your turn, this is the ability Victory Star. Once during your turn, after you flip any coins for an attack of one of your fire Pokemon, you may ignore all results of those coin flips and begin flipping those coins again. And you cannot use more than one Victory Star ability each turn, so this does not stack if we have multiple Victini on our bench. But anyway, a very interesting card. 70 HP, has V-Flame, does 40 damage, by the way, weak to water. So I believe this is kind of meant to go with the new Emboar, which, you know, again, isn't a weak Pokemon at all. Flip a coin for each fire energy attached to this Pokemon. This attack does 30 more damage for each heads. So theoretically, this Emboar should be very consistent in terms of its damage output, a kind of a terrifying Pokemon, in the sense that if you have Victini, you should be able to pretty consistently deal like a lot of damage with Emboar. So I actually kind of like this card. I don't know. I can't think of off the top of my head what else we would use Victini for. I'm sure there are other fire Pokemon that have coin flip attacks, but I just can't really think of them off the top of my head. Comment down below what you think Victini should be used for other than this new Emboar, because that is very interesting. And of course, we get Darmanitan, one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. This year also coin flip fire type Pokemon. So 40 damage for each heads. You flip 2 coins for 1 energy on a stage 1 Pokemon. So like, again, theoretically speaking, this thing is going to come out swinging. Like, you can actually just hit for 80 pretty consistently for 1 energy on your second turn. It's really not bad. I don't know if Victini is specifically released to go with things like Darmanitan and Emboar, but it will be a very interesting sort of fire type archetype. And then next up here, we have Volcarona. And this is Fire Arrow. It does 50 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Also stage 1, 110 HP, 2 fire energy. All that being said, there is a new stadium releasing that we'll talk about here at the end that is, I think, going to be very relevant for almost any non-EX archetype out there. And I think it's actually a really interesting card, but we'll talk about it later. Let's fast forward here to Politoed, which again is another 1 energy attack cost Pokemon. So a lot of these non-EXs have low energy attack costs. It has Raid, 50 damage. If this Pokemon evolved from Poliwhirl during this turn, it does 50 more damage. So 100 for 1 is a pretty big deal, but keep in mind, you have to evolve from the middle evolution, so you can't just like Rare Candy turn 2 and then hit for 100. You have to utilize that middle evolution. So I mean, this also has a 1 energy attack cost. So, you know, not terrible, but definitely interesting. Here is Vaporeon EX. We have already talked about Vaporeon EX. Definitely a fun card. I think Frozen Flow is going to be a lot better than people give it credit for. Being able to kind of just control which Pokemon, or I guess not necessarily control, but stop your opponent from having the Pokemon in the active spot that they would like. With Frozen Flow, it's basically a free Sabrina that you can use every turn. And it's actually really good, especially in the early game. You could boost it Evolution Eevee and get a turn 1 Frozen Flow off. I actually really like Vaporeon. I think it's going to be pretty relevant. Let's talk about this water type cast form, the rainy form. Basically the same thing as the fire type one, but instead of burn, you heal 20 from this Pokemon. So it is objectively a worse card. It only has 70 HP, so there's not a lot of really scenarios where you would need to heal 20 damage from it. But that is the water type cast form. I forgot about Quagsire here. Basically, this is like a water fighting Pokemon. So it's 1 water energy, 2 colorless, Muddy Headbutt, 60 damage. And if this Pokemon has any fighting energy attached to it, it does 60 more. So again, not something we'll probably ever see play, but there it is. And here is the Snowy cast form. So this does 40, and then it does sleep, but it's for 2 energies instead of 1. But this card is also pretty strong. If you really think about it, like if you can get this thing off early enough, like if you misdeeded this on your first turn, like this is going to be a really strong Pokemon. But because it's 2 energies, I don't really expect this to see that much play. It's not really worth kind of building your entire deck around it per se. Yeah. Next up is Regice, or Regice. We are getting a new Regice. And the one we had in the past is pretty good. 3 energy, 70 damage, move 2 random energy from this Pokemon to one of your benched Pokemon. We've seen this effect before. Probably not going to see much play. And let's fast forward to the new Sobble, Drizzile, and Inteleon lineup, because this is very, very relevant. This is a really, really cool archetype. So we have Sobble here with Find a Friend. This is, I believe, the immersive card in the set, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, just a basic 60 HP, put a random Pokemon from your deck into your hand. However, Drizzile and Inteleon have 2 very, very strong effects. They have the Swift Shot ability. Once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you may do 20 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So it's only a one-time use, but it's basically like a ping 20 to the active whenever you evolve Drizzile, which is pretty cool. And we have Inteleon, which is the exact same ability, but it's 30 damage instead of 20. So, if you're playing double Inteleon line, that's a lot of extra damage going to the active Pokemon, especially for just Pokemon that you can leave on your bench. Like, this might be even better. I guess it's not better than Greninja because Greninja can hit the bench, but theoretically, this is a really, really strong effect. Like, you can just play Inteleon like with Suicune, and that's pretty cool because Suicune's going to draw double cards, and then of course Inteleon is going to deal, like the whole Inteleon line with Drizzile is going to deal a ton of extra damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. I actually really like this. It's really cool that we have this in the game. I think these cards are going to be really, really, really relevant. Like, I think this is a ton of damage. Just keep in mind, like, if you're playing, it's 50 each. So if you're playing 2 full lines of Inteleon, that's 100 extra damage to the active. That is just sitting in your deck waiting to just be unloaded on your opponent's active Pokemon. That's a lot of damage. 100 damage is a ton. Gonna be really relevant, especially like I said with Suicune that can draw double cards every turn to more consistently draw into these evolutions. I really like that. I think that's cool. I need some water. Hold on. All right. Next up, we've got Rapid Strike Urshifu. This is the one with double types. So we have Dark and Water type Urshifu. They both have pretty interesting attacks. This one, you discard a water energy from this Pokemon for 1 water, 1 colorless, and it does 40, and then you can do 40 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. I actually really like this card. There's a lot of reasons why I like it, but there's also a Dark type Urshifu, and like I said, there's a new stadium that is a really big buff to any non-EX Pokemon, especially one with 2 types, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. And guess what, guys? We are getting a new Magnezone, and it's a Magnezone EX. So finally getting Magnezone EX, which is something that I think we've been getting, like that I speculated us getting for a very long time. The new Magnemite isn't very relevant, 20 in paralysis, but if you got to flip a coin for it for 2 energies, I don't love that. And of course, this Magneton will like never see play. But yes, Magnezone EX. And it is funny that this is the set we're getting Magnezone EX. Of course, with all of the big fighting type buffs that we're getting, Magnetone EX is probably not going to see a lot of play. But if we were to get it in any season other than this season with Lucario and the fighting buffs, it probably would be very relevant because again, we have Magneton, right? So you're basically able to set this thing up for free, which is a really big deal, especially as like a late game sweeping Pokemon. 180 HP is a lot. So this Pokemon, like I said, is a really, really strong inclusion to basically to any deck that would be playing Magnezone normally. However, you're going to get 1 KO'd by Lucario and stuff, which is why I don't know if this Pokemon will see play. But 3 energies, 130, and you discard an energy from this Pokemon. So very similar to the original Magnezone. This time it's just an EX version and it's a lot bigger and badder, but it does have 180 HP. And of course, you can set it up for free, and it's a 2 prize Pokemon because it's not a Mega, of course. So like this card, I think in like, other than all of the new fighting stuff, which is coming out, I think this card is actually very, very good, which is kind of crazy. But we finally got Magnezone EX, which is hilarious. It's super funny that we're getting it now and that all of the fighting Pokemon have gotten buffs and stuff. But hey, shout out to Magnezone EX. Next up is Voltorb. This does 50 damage on a coin flip per 50 HP, but then it evolves into Electrode, which does 20, flip 2 coins, it does 30 more for each heads. So again, a very aggressive, like it kind of reminds me of the old like Genetic Apex Electrode, which again was also very aggressive. Very, very cool. We're getting another Zekrom. I say another, but I feel like we have already a Zekrom in Pokemon Pocket, a non-EX Zekrom. But this does 110 for 3 lightning energies, flip a coin of tails. It also does 30 to itself. These cards never see play. I don't know why they keep releasing them. We also have a new Toxtricity, lightning type, 100 HP, 2 lightning energies, 40 damage. If any of your Pokemon were knocked out from an attack during your opponent's last turn, it does 60 more, and it paralyzed, and it paralyzes. So actually a really effective revenge Pokemon in lightning type decks. I think this card is very relevant. We'll see kind of how the lightning archetypes are this season, because again, a lot of fighting is going to be coming. A lot of people will be playing fighting. This is the fighting type Renaissance set, but yeah, Toxtricity is a good card. We also have Full Belly Bolt, Morpeko, 1 lightning energy, 10 damage. If it has no damage onto it, it does 40. So turn 1, 40 damage on a Morpeko there. Not too terrible. We are getting a new Ralts and a new Kirlia, but no Gardevoir or anything. That's because we are getting a Gallade, and it is a fighting type. However, let's fast forward to Meowstic with Perplexing Ears. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon confused. So, okay, so free confusion here with Meowstic, but it's also a stage 1 with 40 on the attack for 1 energy. So, it's going to be interesting. I don't know if like confusion it's not a terrible effect. Like there are some scenarios because it does stack. It's not sleep, right? So theoretically, you could have Meowstic in the active, confuse your opponent, then maybe have like a Hypno or a couple Hypnos on the bench to put your opponent to sleep. That could be, of course, very interesting. There's a lot of scenarios where Meowstic could be very annoying, but there's a lot of status removal cards seeing play right now because of bad dreams. I just don't know if Meowstic will ever be like that relevant. New Diancie here, 50, heal 20 from each of your psychic Pokemon. Cool. And then we have this new psychic type Oricorio, which has Pester the Dizzy. If your opponent's active Pokemon is confused, deal 40 more damage. So 60 to a confused Pokemon. Again, you're probably supposed to play this with Meowstic. I don't know what other confusion cards are in the game, but yeah, kind of cute, kind of interesting. Anyway, we have a new Hatcherene here with Mental Crush. Stage 2, non-EX, 150 HP psychic type. 2 psychic energies, 70 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is confused, this does 70 more damage. So 140 for 2, and I believe Hatterene here also confuses. So confusion kind of seeming to be the new thing for these psychic type Pokemon, which is kind of annoying, but hey, maybe this confusion stuff does end up being somewhat relevant. We'll have to see. Next up is going to be Bramblegast, which is a really, really cool Pokemon. This ability, Accept Pain, is kind of crazy. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is on your bench, you may move 30 damage. You may move 30 damage that your active Pokemon has on it to this Pokemon. So it's effectively kind of like a heal 30 from your active Pokemon. This card is actually very good because you can do this more than once per Bramblegast. So it's kind of like Indeedee, but it's a little bit different, of course, because, eventually you'll KO your own Bramblegast. So it's more like Dusknoir than Indeedee, but the effect of what it has on your deck is pretty strong because being able to move 30 or 60 damage per turn from like your Mega Pokemon in the active is actually going to be a really big deal. So this ability is really, really strong. You basically funnel the energy or the damage rather to these single prize Pokemon so that, your 3 prize Pokemon is going to be able to survive for more longer, for more longer. It's actually really cool. I think this is better than Dusknoir, like objectively. Theoretically, if you had Bramblegast and Indeedee, like it's going to be really tough to get around certain Pokemon. I think Bramblegast has a ton of potential. That Accept Pain ability is rather incredible, honestly. But okay, let's fast forward to the fighting type because there's a lot of fighting type Pokemon coming in this set. And first of all, let's talk about Bonsly, another new baby Pokemon with a crazy attack. Teary Attack does 10 damage. And then during your opponent's next turn, attacks used by the defending Pokemon do minus 30 damage. That's actually a somewhat big deal, especially considering that this thing has 30 HP. So like all of those Pokemon your opponent would play, like Furfrou and things that do 30 damage, are just not going to be able to KO Bonsly. So that's actually like, that's a pretty big deal. Now you're still going to be able to take damage from like Bad Dreams, Ticking, or Darkrai EX, or Poison, anything like that. So I don't know if this is like super relevant, but also keep in mind that like if you attack with Bonsly, your opponent, it's a weird one. Like it's kind of a weird, it's a strange card. Theoretically speaking, like if your opponent wanted to like Cyrus up a bench Pokemon and then hit it, they would have to deal 30 more than what they would typically need to KO. I don't know how I feel about Bonsly. Again, you can starting planes this thing, and you can actually boost the damage that this Pokemon does with all of the new fighting type support, which is pretty funny. You could play Fighting Coach Lucario, all of the same things that like Tyrogue used to get, Bonsly can get. So like you could Giant Cape, starting planes this thing, minus 30 damage. It's actually going to be kind of annoying to deal with. And I find that to be really, really funny. I don't know how good that's going to be, but a very interesting card. Very, very interesting. And then, of course, we're getting Mega Lucario, which is, the front runner for this set. 90 damage for 2 energies, but if you have 1 extra fighting energy attached, it does 50 more. Stage 1 Pokemon. Now, this isn't on paper the most incredible card for like in terms of how Mega Pokemon are, but it is consistent, and we do have a lot of new fighting support coming, which we'll highlight here later in this video. And we're also getting a non-EX Lucario, non-Mega, which does 90 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon takes 20 plus 20 from attacks. But it is 2 energy 90, so, it will absolutely delete an Oricorio, which is pretty cool. And then the Riolu here with Fighting Fist does 10 damage, but it does 40 to your opponent's active Pokemon EX, which is interesting. Toxicroak is a fighting Pokemon. Again, a low energy attack costs on all these Pokemon, which I do like to see. This does 40 damage and it poisons. So it's like the only fighting Pokemon I think we have in the game that poisons, which is pretty cool. And then here is Gallade, which does 70 damage for 3 energies. And if there's a stadium in play, it does 140. So, there you go. We are getting Throw with Circle Throw, 3 fighting energies, and then switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. I don't know how we're getting 3 energies on this thing, or if you ever would, but there is Throw. But we are getting Sock, which has Brick Break. This attack's damage isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, so it will be able to hit through Bonsly, which is pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, you know, I don't think any of those cards are too crazy. And guess what, guys? More Gen 5. This set's got plenty of Gen 5 in it, and we are getting Crustle EX. Shout out to Crustle. This card is hilarious. For 2 fighting energies on a stage 160 HP Pokemon, it does 90 damage. Just straight up 90 damage. It's interesting. This is not a bad card. It's just so like standard. It's so plain that it's like, it's almost funny to me. Shout out to Crustle, man. Just doing nothing but 90 damage. It does have a retreat cost of 3. So you can play Heavy Helmet on this thing. It's honestly not even going to be a bad card. Again, that's as much damage as Lucario does for 2 energy. And again, it is a fighting type, so we have all of these new buffs. Maybe Crustle is going to be the meta. Who knows? That's a hilarious card, though. Just straight up 90 for 2. That's all it does. You got to love it. Next up is Meloetta, a fighting type Meloetta. Basic 70 HP fighting type. Inspiring Dance for 2 energies does 30, and then during your next turn, attacks used by your fighting Pokemon do plus 30 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. I wish that this was like a single energy attack cost, more like the fire type Oricorio, because these cards are actually pretty relevant. The effect lasts and it lingers onto your next turn regardless of which Pokemon is then attacking next turn. So like Meloetta, you kind of bring it in and then you attack, and then next turn, no matter what fighting Pokemon you use, it's dealing plus 30 damage. And you know, in this season where we're getting a lot of these new fighting damage buff cards, that could be very relevant. It's 2 energies though, which makes it really tough, I think, to play Meloetta. If it was just a single energy attack cost and like plus 20 damage, I feel like this card would be better. But it is interesting. Definitely interesting. New Beware here with Triple Smash. Flip their coins. It does 50 damage for each heads. Pretty funny, pretty silly. And then we have Colossal for 3 energies. Does 90 damage. Flip a coin until you get tails for each heads. Discard the top card of your opponent's deck. So that's also pretty toxic, but it is 3 fighting energies. Fighting getting a lot of support in the set, but we still don't really have any energy ramping for fighting. So that's going to hold a lot of these cards back inherently. Sandaconda, Super Sand Attack for 3 fighting energies as well. Does 70 damage during your opponent's next turn. If the defending Pokemon tries to use an attack, your opponent flips a coin of tails. It doesn't happen. So we've seen those effects before. They're never like that relevant. But we are getting a new Zubat, Golbat, and Crobat with colorless energy attack costs. This does 10 damage, and you switch it to one of your bench Pokemon, is what the Zubat does. Golbat here, Cutting Wind, does 40 for 2. And then Crobat does, for 2 colorless energy, Surprise Attack, or Surprise Strike, 60 damage. And if this moved from your bench to the active this turn, it does 60 more. Actually, a pretty strong attack. I think Crobat's actually a somewhat strong card, coincidentally. New Coughing and Wheezing, which aren't that relevant. We are getting a new Seviper, which does 20 and poisons on a basic Dark-type Pokemon, which is relevant. This is not a bad card whatsoever, considering we do have Nihilego and whatnot. So like in Dark-type decks, for like Poison Dark-type decks, this might be like a really strong leadoff option, because with Nihilego, this is actually 50 damage, right? So that is a pretty big deal. And then, of course, we are getting a new Zoroark EX, which is another interesting Pokemon. We have Zorua, Ascension. Put a random card from this deck that evolves from this Pokemon onto this Pokemon to evolve it. So that's pretty cool. You're going to be able to evolve this pretty consistently, and it evolves into Zoroark EX, which reminds me of Weavile, by the way. Stage 1, 150 HP Dark type, and it has a single energy attack cost, Brutal Bash. Does 30 damage for each of your benched Dark type Pokemon. So if you have a full bench of Dark type Pokemon, that's 90 damage for 1 energy. It's really not that bad. It reminds me very much of Weavile. However, it should be a little bit more easy to use this than Weavile. Very easy to just get Pokemon on your bench right now. Like, that's certainly something we can do. They have to be Dark type though. So I don't know if we have like any, I mean, you could play Lycia in like a 50 HP Pokemon. Zorua has 60 HP, so you can't find Zorua with Lycia. But yeah, no, it's very relevant. This is going to be a very aggressive Dark-type card. It's 150 HP, so you are just going to get KO'd by a lot of things, but you can Training Area and hit for 100 damage. You could Rocky Helmet to either further boost the damage. It's going to be a very aggressive Pokemon. What's funny with Zoroark is that it actually does more damage than Mega Absol, so that's always pretty funny. I actually like this card. It's cool. It does remind me of Weavile, being the stage 1 low energy attack cost, Dark-type EX Pokemon. Shout out to Weavile EX, real ones, remember. Mandibuzz, Blindside. This attack does 60 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon that has damage onto it. Pretty cool for 1 energy. Let's fast forward to Malamar. Okay. Evolution Jammer. 40 damage during your opponent's next turn. They cannot play any Pokemon from their hand to evolve their Pokemon. This is a very big deal. This card is crazy. Stopping your opponent from being able to evolve is a really big deal. Like, most decks just will not be able to deal with Malamar if they can't evolve, because like they don't have a Pokemon that would be able to deal enough damage. It is 2 energies, but you can accelerate to this, right? You can literally, because you're playing Inkay, like you can just play like baby Pokemon and generate energies and then get turn 2 Malamar off pretty often. That's going to be very annoying. Like, this Malamar is going to be a really, really annoying card. Here is the Dark type single strike Urshifu, fighting in Dark type, and then does 110, discard a Dark energy from this Pokemon. It's not too incredible, but Kubfu here, we didn't highlight it, but Kubfu here does generate or accelerate Colorless energy. Some people, when I saw this card, I was like, this is the only card that does this, but somebody reminded me that Delcatty does generate Colorless energy, which is pretty funny, and I did forget about Delcatty. We're getting a Dark type Zarude card, which has Dark Vengeance for 2 Dark energies, 40 damage, and if any of your Dark Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent last turn, it does, I think this is 80 more, so 120 for 2 on a Revenge KO, on a Revenge attacker is kind of a big deal. That's a lot of damage. I skipped over Bombardier with Villainous Delivery. As long as this Pokemon is on your bench, your active Dark type Pokemon's retreat cost is 1 less. It's not a terrible card. I don't know the applications where this will see play. Again, it will give certain Pokemon free retreat, like a Dino or an Absol. There's a lot of Dark type Pokemon that are relevant with a retreat cost of 1, but an interesting card nonetheless. Very interesting. Let's fast forward here. A lot of these Steel type Pokemon really not that relevant, I don't think. I don't really think it's worthwhile to highlight any of these. We are getting a new Melmetal, a non-EX Melmetal for 3 fighting to 60, and then next turn it'll do 60 more. So maybe that's better than the other Melmetal that we have. However, on the first attack, we're not KOing Oricorio, which is definitely tough. And we're getting a Corviknight EX, a very random EX card. Stage 2, 180 HP Steel type, and quite simply for 3 Metal Energies does 110 damage, and you discard a random energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. Not terrible. We do have some metal type energy ramping in the game. This has a lot of HP. You can play this with Steel Apron. You can play this with Metal Core Barrier. There's a lot of, Steel type support that we have in the game. It is a stage 2 Pokemon, so you can play Lily with this Corviknight. It's 110 damage, but discarding an energy definitely can be pretty relevant. I actually think this card is very decent. I don't know if it'll see more play than like Scizor or Steelix or anything like that, but as far as non-Mega EX Steel type Pokemon go, I actually really like Corviknight. Kind of a random card to be getting, but we are getting it. And the next up is Flygon. We need to talk about Flygon. Did we miss Trapinch? Where's Trapinch? Right here. So we are getting a Flygon EX, the first Dragon type like EX Pokemon we're getting in so long. But here is Vibrava. So this one's Dragon type, but Trapinch is fighting. This has Sandwind for 1 colorless, does 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon. And then we have Flygon EX, stage 2 Dragon type, 180 HP. It's got the ability Sand Slammer. During Pokemon Checkup, which is in between turns, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, do 10 damage to each of your opponent's active Pokemon. This ability is very, very strong. 180 HP does not have a weakness. This thing will stick around for quite a bit of time, and it's not a 3-prize Pokemon. So if Flygon goes down, it's kind of like whatever. You don't even need to attack with this thing. For it to provide a lot of value. 10 damage to each of your opponent's Pokemon is a big deal because you can kind of pick and choose where you want to go from there. But it does have Dragon Pulse for a Grass, a Fighting, and a Colorless. You do 140, and you discard the top card of your deck. So I don't love the attack here. I'm trying to think, can you Leafeon? Yeah, I think you can Leafeon, or is Leafeon only to Grass Pokemon? It might be. I forget. It's an interesting attack cost. I don't know what we have available in the game to utilize this attack very effectively, but Vibrava doing 10 to each of your opponent's Pokemon, and then Flygon's ability Sand Slammer, I think it's actually really decent spread damage. If Flygon is in the active for 2 to 3 turns, that's 30 damage all across the board, and that's going to be actually pretty good. It's really not bad whatsoever, and especially like if you just play like a sustained Flygon deck and try to keep this thing alive for as long as possible with Lily and Indeedee, things like that. Like the longer this thing's out there, the more relevant it's going to be. And I think that we have enough of those tools in the game, which is cool. It does have a retreat cost of 2, so we cannot play Heavy Helmet, but you can Giant Cape this thing. We have Indeedee, we have Brambleghast, we have Lily. This thing is going to be pretty interesting. It'll be fun to try to play around that. Next up is Blissey, happiness supplement. Once during your turn, you may remove a random special condition from your active Pokemon. So there you go. It's PCL. Well, it's not PCL, but it's, you know, it's a status condition heal. So finally, they've given us a Pokemon that does this. I don't know if people will play that, but you can. There's a new EV with Jumping Kick, 10 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Interesting. We have a new Dunsparce, Bop and Burrow, 60 HP, basic, colorless, 1 energy, 20 damage. You may shuffle this Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your deck list. I don't really know the point of that, but that's pretty interesting, I guess. And then here's the colorless cast form. Blow Through. If a stadium is in play, it does 20 more damage. So this is colorless, basic, 1 energy, and pretty oftentimes going to be a 40 damage attack. So not a terrible card either. We are getting a new Regigigas with Seal of Antiquity. If you don't have Regirock, Regice, and Registeel on your bench, this Pokemon cannot attack. But if, of course, you have all 3 of those Pokemon on your bench, for 3 colorless energies, you do 100 damage, and then you take 1 colorless energy from your energy zone and attach it to one of your benched Pokemon. I don't know if that's going to make Regi Pokemon that relevant, but it is cool. It's cool that we have maybe like this Regi archetype kind of going. Interesting, nonetheless. Watchdog does 30, and then next turn its attack does 30 more for 1 colorless. Pretty cool, I guess. We have a new Stoutland with Fighting Fang, 70 damage, and if your opponent's Pokemon is an EX, do 70 more. So for 3 colorless, we do 140. Again, nothing too crazy there. And guess what? We are getting a Mega Audino, which is also very odd, but it is a colorless basic Mega Pokemon, just like Mega Kangaskhan. This has a retreat cost of 2, so no heavy helmet able to be played on this thing, but it does have Heartfelt Shine for 3 colorless energies. It'll do 90 damage, and then you heal 30 damage from each of your Pokemon. This is interesting because, you know, you're also healing 30 from the active Audino, and it's got a lot of HP. You can Starting Plains this thing. You can Giant Cape this thing, go to 220 HP, which is pretty crazy. You know, lots of healing available in the game. And of course, we do have Ilima. So theoretically speaking, you can just scoop this thing up. I don't know if this is a card that will see play, but you could definitely build a deck around this in a very interesting way. Kind of a crazy card in that sense. Kind of a crazy card. Interesting. Very interesting. And then we have Furfrou here, which takes 20 less damage from attacks, 80 for 2. Flip a coin if tails, the attack does nothing too crazy there. And this is Rookity and, of course, Corvisquire, which evolve into Corviknight, but these are colorless Pokemon. This is two colorless, 30 damage. Discard all tool cards from your opponent's active Pokemon. This does Pluck, also discarding tool cards. Field Blower. So these are now the trainer cards before we wrap up the video. We talked about Field Blower. This is like the replacement for Guzma. This discards either a stadium or a tool card, which is a really cool item. It's going to see a lot of play, I think. Definitely going to see a lot of play. Another new Pokemon tool card is Lucky Egg. If the Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an attack from your opponent's active Pokemon, draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. These types of cards are like somewhat common in Pokemon TCG, but I don't know if they ever see that much play. It's not terrible. Like whenever you can draw a lot of cards in pocket, like it's going to be strong. So I don't know if people will play this, but definitely pretty cool. Karina, as we've seen before, buffs fighting type attacks by 30 to your opponent's Pokemon active EX. I think this will be definitely pretty relevant. Fighting type Pokemon are going to be very dangerous, but there are some non-EX archetypes in the game that, you know, fighting type might struggle with, but either way, shout out to Karina. Definitely a cool card. Another new supporter we're getting is Cabby, which puts a random stadium card from your deck into your hand. So we do have some stadium search in the form of a supporter card. I don't know if there's going to be that many decks that are super reliant on stadium cards, but if they are, like if your deck is entirely reliant on a stadium, then Cabby's going to be relevant, like for things like those cast form decks, you know what I mean? So it's cool. Stadium search in the form of a supporter. We are getting Charin, so some Gen 5 support coming in this set, which I like to see. During your opponent's next turn, all of your Watchdog and Stoutland take negative 100 damage from attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX. So Stoutland going to be kind of a tank, and of course, Watchdog going to be kind of a tank. And I think you can, I don't know. Yeah, that's a weird one. I mean, theoretically, it's not bad, but interesting. Next up is Parasol Lady. Put one of your water Pokemon in play, except any Pokemon EX into your hand. So interesting. I don't know the applications for Parasol Lady, but theoretically speaking, it is just a scoop up card for non-EX water type Pokemon. Was there anything in the set that came out that you would use this with? I don't really know. I guess Inteleon. Oh no. Oh no. I didn't read Parasol Lady. Wait a minute. So we can recycle Inteleons? So we can just cycle these Inteleon with Swift Shot all game long. Now, if you scoop up the Pokemon, it'll scoop up all of the previous evolutions, I believe is how this works. Put one of your water Pokemon in play, except any Pokemon EX into your hand. Maybe it's not. We'll have to see how this effect works, but being able to basically evolve an Inteleon, scoop it up and then re-evolve it in the same turn is going to be crazy. Like having like a scoop up net for this whole Inteleon line is going to be crazy. This is definitely something I could see Suicune playing, the Inteleon Parasol Lady. Like this is going to be aggressive. This is going to be a lot of fun, guys. Shout out to Parasol Lady. I did not even see that card up until now. That's wild. The Inteleon stuff is going to be a ton of fun. Very annoying. Next up, Fragrant Forest, a very good stadium card. Once during each player's turn, that player may put a random basic grass Pokemon from their deck into their hand. So incredible grass type support. This is a stadium that we'll see play in virtually any grass type deck. I really, really like it. It's going to be really nice. You can grab Ogerpon. You could grab Celebi. Did we talk about Celebi? We must have, yeah, at the beginning. Yeah. So you can grab Time Recall with this. It's going to be really good. I really like this for really any grass type deck. This is a really, really nice stadium card. And of course, Arena of Antiquity, which we've talked about, just like Karina, but it's plus 20 to for our 4-year fighting Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon EX. So fighting decks are going to just be absolutely deleting EX Pokemon off the face of the earth. Lucario does 140 for 3. You could have a Fighting Coach Lucario to buff that by 20. You could have Arena of Antiquity and Karina to do plus 50. All of a sudden, Mega Pokemon, most Mega Pokemon are going to be threatened to get one-hit KO'd by Lucario. And I think that's kind of how these fighting type decks are going. But this is going to work for any fighting type card. You know, theoretically, Crustle is going to be able to hit you for like 160, which is kind of crazy. So the fighting type stuff's going to be interesting. We'll have to see if it's enough for Lucario or any other fighting type deck to be that relevant. But I really like Arena of Antiquity. And then lastly here, the last card of the set is going to be Bounded Field. This is a very, very relevant stadium card. When applying the opponent's active Pokemon's weakness to damage from attacks used by the Pokemon in play, both yours and your opponent's that aren't Mega Evolution Pokemon EX apply weakness as X2. So basically, for any non-Mega deck, you're going to be able to... how do I put this? For any deck that isn't a Mega Pokemon EX deck, you're now able to counterplay that specific deck very easily. That's the only way I can really put this. So for things like Suicune, things like Hydreigon that are weak to let's just say Hydreigon's weak to grass. Now you can actually deal double damage if you're a grass type Pokemon to your opponent's Hydreigon in their deck list. Suicune is another example of that. So anything that's lightning type will deal double damage to your active Suicune. So this is a big deal because this means that if there's any like one deck that's completely taking over the metagame that isn't a Mega Pokemon deck, you're going to be able to build a counter meta deck very specifically for it and be very, very effective, like very effective. For example, like I don't even know, like for an example, something like an Executor EX, instead of dealing, you know, if you flip heads, instead of dealing, what does Executor do? Like 80? So instead of dealing, you know, 100 damage on a Hydreigon for weakness, you'd be hitting for 200 or 160 damage. So like that's the difference, right? So like in specific scenarios against specific decks that are maybe like taking over the metagame, you could say, hey, I'm going to build a deck that is, strong against, that particular deck that has weakness, except now I just deal double damage. So it's almost like an auto win almost into those decks. That's what Bounded Field does. A very interesting card, one that is going to be really, really interesting for meta progression and is going to allow a lot of really interesting archetypes to pop up, specifically decks that don't deal a ton of damage, but are really fast paced and aggressive. You know, something like, Manectric with Bounded Field is going to absolutely wipe Suicune off the face of the earth because it's just never going to be able to live, a turn 100 damage attack from like a Zero Aura or something like that, or like an Oricorio hitting for 140. It's a really big deal. Or 100. I guess Oricorio would deal 100. So this is a really cool stadium. Like I'm really glad this is in the game because I think it's going to change the way that people build decks and then like plan for archetypes very specifically. So I really like Bounded Field. I think it's a really, really cool card. Very, very interesting. Very interesting stadium card. Here are all the full arts here. Very cool. We're getting some shinies. So the crown rares in the set are Celebi and Bombardier. We have shinies for Mega Blaziken, Greninja EX, Jolteon EX, Mega Absol, Mega Steelix, Dragalge, Hitmonchan. By the way, Hitmonchan's going to be pretty scary in this new meta with these new cards. Keep that in mind. Some other new shinies, like I said, Sobble is the immersive, but also Lucario. So Sobble's random, but Lucario is also an immersive in this set. And yeah, guys, that is the full set here. This video's gone a little long. We're almost at 45 minutes, so we got to wrap this up. But comment down below. Let me know what you guys think of this set. I'm very excited for a lot of the things that they've added to the game. I think it'll shake up the meta a ton. You're going to want to stay tuned here on the channel. We'll cover it all in the upcoming days. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to register for PMPT number 29 this weekend to play with all of these new cards and see where the meta goes. But also, don't forget to tune into the live stream tonight. If you're watching this on Monday, tonight at 8 p.m., we're going to be going live for this new set release. So I'm really, really excited for that. But anyway, guys, there it is. That's the video. Let's get out of here. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.